Welcome to Semgrep Community. I am Tanya Janka, and I am here with my guest Mo. And Mo, will you introduce yourself and maybe tell everyone a little tiny bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So, hi, I'm Mo. That's the whole name. But yeah, so I am an senior AppSec engineer at Roblox right now. I have almost 10 years of experience in security, which is kind of crazy because when I first graduated, I was like, man, it's going to take 5 years before I even qualified to get like a CISSP or anything. And now I'm at 10 years and I'm like, I don't think I'm going to do that.
I
So
know.
yeah,
You only wanted at the beginning, right?
yeah. So it was just it's just so much. But yeah, so I've hopped around different parts of the industry. So started off as a consultant, went into media and entertainment at some really fun places like NBC and Warner Brothers, and then got into dishwashers at Bosch before coming to Roblox. Yeah.
Wait. You got in as a dishwasher?
No, so Bosch, whenever I talk about Bosch, it's a company that they do a lot of things. I promise they do more things than dishwashers, but that's what people knew them for, you know? So when I was talking to my parents about it, they were like, "Oh yeah, our son works for the dishwasher place." Because nobody else knew what they did other than power tools, but they were just restaurant family dishwashers. So that's it.
They make
So
some
yeah.
of the nicest appliances around. They're very nice.
Mhm. They are really cool, and they have a great discount, which I did not take advantage of. So
You're a lost man.
I know.
So, so I guess I should introduce myself. So I'm Tanya, also known as SheX Purple, and I am the head of community and education at Semgrep. And this is a Semgrep community event. So we do things like this all the time. We are going to do a Cards Against AppSec event in Vegas this summer. And so we just basically Semgrep lets me goof around, and I run the academy, which I put a link in the chat. And my job's pretty fun. But I invited Mo on because we were talking and he was saying you should be using AI for your AppSec program. And I'm like, what does that mean? You should talk with me about it, but with an audience watching. and and so I was thinking maybe you could tell me about some of the stuff you do, because you're an AppSec nerd, right? And
Yeah.
and so
So yeah.
what is AI and what is the fuss, Mo?
So I think to talk about the fuss around AI, I kind of have to go a little bit back 5 years ago when I was at Bosch. So I said that I worked around with dishwashers, but actually Bosch had this team at the time. It was really small, and it was the Center for AI Research. And I worked there not as one of the PhDs, but as the first security engineer because they were like, what the heck do we do here? We don't know how to secure AI and we don't know how to do any of these things. So I spent a lot of time figuring out okay, well, how do we defend these kind of things? And as I was doing that, I was like, well, a lot of this feels like supply chain security. A lot of this doesn't feel very crazy, new or anything. So one night we all went out and I was like, y'all, this is really great. I love working here, but what the heck is AI? And one of the guys that was there was just like, it's just ML. It's just ML. Think about it like that. And that was 5 years ago, right? So since then, it has changed dramatically. So whenever I think about AI, and versus ML, I think, okay, well, ML was made for a specific use case, right? So in my case, it was mainly manufacturing, and people were making models just to do one thing, right? And that was all it could do. There was a huge startup time. You had to download all of these different packages and you had to learn how to get all of this data. And there was just a lot of startup that you had to do in order to be effective. Now with LLMs and AI, a lot of that data that was accessible is a lot easier to use now, since it's no longer just a single purpose, and a lot of these models now are trained on multiple different purposes. They have a lot more context and access to information, and they're usually pre-trained to do a lot of different things. But on top of that, the cherry on top is NLP, so natural language processing. So it's the reason why you go onto a popular chatbot and you're able to have a conversation, right? So it needs to be able to understand like how humans communicate and then be able to translate back these concepts into a human language. So
And
that's why
so
it's really big, because now it's just so accessible, easy to use. Everybody can do it. You no longer have to sit with a team of like 20 to 30 PhDs just to figure out if the grass is green.
okay, I really like this. That's a really simplified, easy to understand way to say it. Thank you. Which is not always the answer I get when I ask questions. Sometimes it's like, explain it to me like I'm 5. I'm like, not like I'm a 5-year-old with 3 PhDs. So that was really good. Thank you. So,
Yeah.
so what can we do with AI? Because I believe that doing documentation is not the funnest part of our job. And I think you might have talked about that.
Mhm. Yeah, so there's a lot that you can do, and I know that's not saying much. It's kind of one of those situations where you have so many things, like you kind of get a decision paralysis, right? So if you talk about like the things that you can do, the options are really just endless. I would say the things that you should do, depending on like what you're trying to accomplish, is different. Um, One of the really important things whenever we talk about AI is, well, how are you going to achieve a goal, right? And in order to do that, you need intention, right? Like if I go into Whole Foods and I am hungry, I'm going to most likely pick anything off of any shelf and like just nom nom nom. But if I go in with an intent, like this is the dinner I want to make, I'm going to focus on specific ingredients, and then I'm going to make a meal based on those ingredients. And so my options are really limited because I know I'm going in for X, Y, and Z. X, Y, and Z gives me X amount of like different combinations of things I can make. So that's all I'm going to focus on. And then that's when you get the really good stuff, right? So you make a meal that is full of intent. Maybe you were going for something that's protein heavy, so you only focus on certain things. It's the same concepts for AI. So rather than thinking of like all the things you can do, think of the things that the goals that you want to achieve, and then figure out everything else. Yeah.
I've been using AI to help me not have writer's block. And so this might sound
Yeah.
silly, but I'll be like, write me a blog about this. And then it will. And then I'm like, that's terrible. You should write it. And then I just write my own blog. And I'll include almost nothing from the thing. It sounds so dumb, but I now no longer have writer's block because I'm like, write a thing about this. And then I'm always like, that's every time I'm like, that's terrible. And but it helps so much. It helps a lot too with writing marketing copy because I don't like doing that, but sometimes I have to because work. And so then I'm like,
Yeah.
write marketing copy about this. I'm like, be very excited. I'm like, whoa, be less excited. so so what? How could I make it write some documentation for me? How could I try to get it to do that?
Sure. So one thing that I also do not like is writing like these big reports that I have to do sometimes, right? And a lot of these reports are just standard templates, and it's like, okay, well, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. So there's specific information that you definitely know that you need. So that's the kind of stuff that you can kind of generate and blurb out, and it's easy enough, right? So, for example, if you're writing a pen test, or whenever I'm doing like a risk analysis, I say I use these different methodologies to do this, right? And then it will fill in all the fluff content, and I can read that and figure out where I want to make my edits, right? So generating lots of content really fast is really very handy. As far as like making sure you're getting documentation that is usable for other people, you want to be careful here. One of the things to note about AI is that, again, we're taking that same example of you can take a kid in a candy store, even, or just me in a grocery store. You're going to buy whatever you can just because, if your intent is just I want to create documentation, or I want to eat food, you're going to just take anything off the shelf. As long as it makes sense, you may end up with the popular concept of girl dinner. In my case, like a Tuesday night. But yeah, you end up with that. So you get documentation that doesn't necessarily make sense together, but it's on a plate and you're gonna use it because that's just what you got. The scary part about AI is that it's very confident for some reason, right? So when NLP was being used, there was this really fun project that was open source where you can go type something in and it would tell you what the sentiment analysis of the content that you pasted. So for me, I would use it when I was sending text messages because everybody was afraid of texting, right? So I wanted to make sure I wasn't saying anything too aggressive. For AI, it's basically like, okay, well, maybe I don't know something. Like I always imagine AI having this conversation with itself. I don't know if this is actually right. How do I make it sound really confident so people think I'm right? And that's what you kind of get whenever you just want to type documentation. So we're afraid of hallucinations. We're afraid of an overconfident AI king queen. So we'll want to focus on making sure that we are properly sandboxing for the stuff that we want. And again, there's a lot of different ways you can do this. There are some really great resources for programmatically making sure AI stays within certain bounds. For me, I like to mix a bunch of different concepts. So, for example, you've all heard of, or if you haven't, there's the Socratic method, where like people are, you're trying to figure out why, right? I actually like to start off with that kind of prompt where I'm engaging the AI in a way where rather than give me content, I want it to give me questions that lead to better content. Then from there, I want to make sure I'm rationalizing that content and making sure it makes sense in the context of that I want to use it in. And lastly, I want to make sure that the content is accurate enough where I feel confident to use it. The last part of that, all the way at the end, is using AI as your proofreader again. So it's really good at being able to, again, it's built with a lot of NLP concepts just available to you. And the entirety of human language. So why wouldn't it be a good editor? So it's a great time to have it go look at your content, make sure it makes sense, it flows well. The last piece of that is ensuring that it's not generating new stuff. So maybe it's trying to fill in words for you and it throws in a couple of concepts. You don't want it to throw in a candy bar if you're trying to eat healthy. So we'll want to make sure that we're telling it to not do these things.
It does act very confident when it's wrong or right. And it's not like a person where they're like, ooh, maybe this is the wrench that you want. When you know that maybe it's not the correct sized wrench, right?
Yeah.
From there.
It's basically like here.
This is the one, and I am certain. Yeah, it gives some really bad secure coding advice. And
yes.
Yeah, we have an AI task force at work, and I'm like, I want it to read the entire OWASP wiki. I want to watch all the OWASP videos. I want to read my book. I want to read the draft of my upcoming book. I want it to read, I have a pile of books back there. I need it to read all of those. And then I want it to give us advice. Do not let it speak to the customers until it reads some good stuff, because the advice that it gives will, anyway. Okay, so rant. So what about, so speaking of giving advice, so a thing customers ask us about a lot is, you tell me I have this vulnerability and that's nice. Can you give me some more context? And so could we use AI to give us more context?
Oh, 100%. I actually think that that's probably the best case to use it for. So if there's a vulnerability or even concepts. So as an AppSec engineer, one of the big things is I was listening to this podcast on like the roles of an AppSec engineer, and there's just so many things that we have to do, right? We have to be like helpful in all of these different languages. We have to be proficient with all these different technologies, especially when you're a lean and not mean team. You want to make sure that you're able to engage on all these different fields at different
lean
levels.
And not mean. I love it. Yeah. I'm feeling that, just FYI.
Feel free. So when you want to do that, you need to be able to quickly catch up and engage with teams. So you can point it towards documentation, and say, hey, I'm wondering how we do this, right? And you make it very specific. Another really like little hack is typically when you're doing like prompt engineering, or you want to find how you want to prompt it, right? So for the most case, a lot of people are using like zero prompts, which is there's not a prompt other than the question that you're asking. Um, what you want to maybe go into is using more like contextual prompts, or doing like chain of reasoning prompts, where it's now going to like want to explain something to you. On top of that, it's sometimes hard to get all the context you need. So if you want something security related and you just say, I want you to write me a security based explanation of this, that's probably not going to be as great. But if you say, assume the role of a security engineer, you instantly feed it a lot of context, because now it needs to understand, what is a security engineer, right? What does a security engineer typically look for? What does a security engineer find relevant? So it takes all of that in like very quickly. So and the name of the game for prompt engineering is essentially keeping the prompt as like dense as possible without creating too much complexity, so that you're not spending up a lot of time and resources trying to get to an answer. Rather, you're getting a really good response back fast. So you want to use as many little tips and tricks as you can to keep the prompt small, but keep your answers really relevant. So you can use stuff like that to very quickly get information you can use. Again, verify everything. Like, run a prompt once, check it 5 times. It doesn't take that much time, and you can actually get AI to check itself, but we can talk about that later. But check it a couple times for accuracy before you go and spouting it off, or like test it out yourself. It's some of this stuff it's usable code that you can try. Yeah, so definitely verify everything.
There are some questions in the chat. So Matt asks,
Sure.
you want a custom vector store? I do too. Is anyone making that for AppSec? What does he mean by custom vector store?
So I'm not too sure, actually. So I'm sorry. I'm like not that like knowledgeable
I was
about
thinking
it.
that
But
too.
are you trying to like say like maybe like a place where like you have a bunch of different things that you like, for example, for us, I'm thinking like attack vectors. So one of the things that we have is we have a bunch of customized vulnerabilities that we found doing threat modeling and just like learning the environment at Roblox. So we have a ton of just like pre-known vulnerabilities and different attack vectors that we have for our own environment. So yeah, that's like kind of what we use there. And then to actually use that for like for us to use that, we want to use that to like engage with partners and be like, hey, well, we keep seeing this vulnerability in like, these pieces of documentation that you're writing, right? So this goes into a little bit more into the threat modeling part of it, but you can kind of automate it a little bit. So yeah, it just depends on what you mean by vector store. I kind of went off, but I bet.
No, it's okay. Sharif Mansour, who is one of the chapter leaders for the OWASP London, England chapter, he made an LLM that was trained just on the OWASP wiki. And it's so much smarter from a security perspective. And of course, I'm like, let's train it on this, let's train it on that. Like, come on, my friend, because I don't know how to do that yet. And he has all these amazing ideas. And I wonder if that's what they mean, like a custom vector. Like, because that's what I want, is I just want one that understands AppSec and secure coding and like secure design and threat modeling. Like, that would be perfect. I don't care if it writes good marketing copy. I'll use something else for that. Right. So I wonder if that's what that means.
Okay. So, yeah, that makes sense.
But so Gavin's asking, blogs are nice, but I'm interested in how to leverage this for my security team. I'm assuming his security team doesn't do silly things like write blogs like mine does. What about privacy concerns? Since OpenAI and others use your input to train their next model, for example, Samsung. Local models are harder to run and not like financially available to everyone. And so what
Right.
specific patterns are you using in your AppSec program specifically? So he said specifically a few times that he
Yeah.
wants.
So I'll give you two answers, because you're right about the privacy stuff. And there's this huge part that I didn't go into, which is how we are actually using it. So there's one, you obviously want to go through your GRC compliance legal teams to make sure that when you are using these products, you're using them in the right way. You do open up your company to a bunch of, well, I think the cool name for it was like shadow AI. So like it's a really cool vulnerability that everybody's talking about. Like,
I have a
or
comment on that after. We have a solution for you.
yeah, I just think it's the coolest thing. I think it's a cool name, like really buzzwordy name. But yeah, great. So you want to check that. On the other hand, right? Yes, it's expensive to run this stuff at scale for sure. Again, we are a small team, so it's a little bit different. For me to run like a local LLM is actually not too hard. There are a ton of different projects in the open source community that do enable you to run like local chat servers. And you can, with a little bit of engineering work, you can run this on a small scale. You can also like give it documentation and tell it to access that specifically. So on the vendor part, that first part that I was talking about, our AppSec program has some access to a couple of tools that enable us to use LLMs as part of that subscription. So we can, again, these features just give us access essentially to the vendor's instance of OpenAI, and depending on like what their environment looks like and their deals with OpenAI, or whatever vendor they're using on the back end, some of them use different types of like models. So we can kind of make a decision based on that. In our case, the vendor does keep it within their environment, so they're not actually sending the information out. Like anything that they basically send out is anonymized and it's not company specific, and we trust it a little bit more. But it's still not something that I want to give it like very, I would say like detailed environment data about like the things we're using in AppSec. So I guess to talk more about the use cases. Right now, because it's still very experimental, I want to be careful with doing things like doing like big scale threat modeling, right? If I do that, I have a local LLM that I use, and I also have another a publicly available one that I use, that I've kind of tailored and tuned, and I will only ask really general questions to that one, right? So I'm not asking it like, oh, like look at our IAM policy, like is this right? Rather I'll give it some like criteria about IAM policies in general and have it give commentary on that. Then we'll have a discussion almost like it was another person. The other half, again, my local part, that one I like to use it for doing a little bit more in-depth like documentation. So every open source model has different specifications and things that it's good at. Some of them are really good at code. Some of them are really good at just doing human language processing. Some of them are a little bit more general. Some of them are really good at processing documentation. So figuring out which ones work for you and figuring out what using multiple LLMs in the same time, it does start to run up your laptop's lifespan. Definitely cuts off a couple of years, but you can start to do really interesting things without risking company data.
Cool.
Yeah.
So in the chat, people were asking, so the person from OWASP who made who trained an LLM, his name is Sharif Mansour, and his LLM's called OWASP CRE. And so you can contact him, and maybe I'll put in the show notes later a link to that. So shadow AI. So Semgrep kept getting asked about that. So one of our founders made a Semgrep rule set that will find all your shadow AI in your code, and he's open sourcing it next week for free.
Oh, that's dope.
Yeah, so you can use it with Semgrep OSS or you can use it with Semgrep Pro, but he's making it free for everyone because he's that guy. He's this. So watch out for that blog post. Like we're just like editing the blog post and like arguing over grammar, but all the work's done. So yeah, I know. It's so cool, right? And so it'll find all the major LLMs that are in your code, and like you can tweak it past there if you want to, because you can customize the rules. But basically, it'll find all of the instances and be like, "Is this licensed? Because it doesn't look like it." Um, so yes, solutions finally. So Dave mentioned, okay, so you mentioned hallucinations. Both of us agree, all of us agree that that's a thing, but bias is also another thing. And so when I ask it questions, it has bias based on what it's been trained on, right? And unfortunately, the internet's not an unbiased place. And like if it's getting trained on Stack Overflow, I don't know if you know, but the most secure answers are usually, or the most upvoted answers are often the most insecure answers. And I actually recently got banned for life from Stack Overflow, but whatever, I'm going to make a new account. Um, because I tried to answer every Stack Overflow question on Semgrep on the same day, which was a mistake. And they didn't like my answers. So like one answer was, how do I suppress this result from Semgrep so I can get to prod? And I was like, yo, I'm reading your code. That's XSS. Do not suppress. Fix it. Here's how you fix it. And I got like 4 downvotes in like 1 minute. Like, you didn't answer his question. I'm like, he's asking the wrong question. Right. And
Yeah.
so, no, but if that's what's getting trained on, it's getting trained on, I want to suppress the vulnerability result so I can get to prod. That's the right answer. What do we do about this bias, Mo?
Yeah, no, I mean, unfortunately, there's no real good solution to bias other than again, humans will always be needed in this AI like age for a very long time until we're not, right? Um, I'm just saying that for Skynet. But you do have to check everything, check it twice, check it 5 times. You don't always know like when something wrong is happening. Actually, a really good example with the local one that I was working with, there was a vulnerability that was not very clear. It was very like subtle and it was very environment specific. And I was trying to figure out, okay, well, like, how can I like teach it to identify this without me needing to intervene? And turns out needs a ton of documentation, a ton of context, and it is still going to also need access to like code. It's going to need to be able to find this code in context again in other places and see code like it. It takes a lot to actually train. And then by the time you get to the end of it, if you remember what I said at the beginning, ML, it's really only going to be able to find that one thing really well. And it'll find patterns that are like it, but you're not really getting the most out of it when you're biasing it towards like one piece of thing. So that's kind of why you still have to do all these checks, even though you can, get it to, oh, I want to fix your bias. You're actually going to bias it in a different direction. It's really just about like getting as much as you can as possible. Get within like your own environment too. Like when you're looking at code that's within your company, that's got its own like bias. I'm sure that there are different things that people are going to skew towards. So getting good samples is really tough, and it's difficult for anybody. You really do have to train on best standards, and even those standards are written by sometimes the same type of people with the same type of coding biases, right? Like I like OAuth because it's all open source. Lots of different people from different backgrounds get to contribute to it. So I think that's kind of like one of the reasons why like OAuth data, in my opinion, will be really valuable in the future. But again, it's not going to solve bias. You're going to have to look at everything.
And OWASP, we argue things to death, but in a good way, so
Yeah.
that the answer that's up there, you've had many security experts be like, I don't know. For instance, there's a new like OWASP top 10 for CI/CD, and
Mhm.
it's really good. But I'm like, I see one that's missing. And so I'm going to rate them and be like, what about this? Where's this rank in below? Because I was talking with one of my friends that presented on it, and he's like, oh my gosh, that's terrifying. I totally forgot about that one. Oh, wow. You know what I mean? Like, and so it's open to discussion because they just want to present the absolute best advice they can. And I that's one of the things I like about it a lot. Oh, Gavin just asked a better question than I had planned. So I don't know, Mo, if you've read the OWASP LLM
Mhm.
top 10
Yeah.
risks. Have you read it? And do you have any thoughts on it? 'Cause I have
So I've read most of it. I could not tell you like everything right now off the top of my head, right?
read up in a
But
rush.
yeah, I've read it and it's actually a really good baseline for like capturing like the initial stuff. Like I said, for whenever I look at LLMs, the initial kind of like regurgitation that I want to give is like supply chain security. But you do see a lot of parallels with like LLMs that kind of link to different things that we've already seen, which I think is the important thing when like looking at a new technology. It's like not freaking out immediately, but trying to draw parallels and then make them specific to the use case that you're trying to fit it towards. So like, for example, XSS, SQL injection, right? We know all these injection type based attacks, right? They all still are relevant to AI. We just have to treat it a little bit differently now, right? The same thing with like, okay, we've got like all of these different contributing factors to our AI product. Why aren't we doing proper like S bombs? You know, so like, do we know like what it's all composed of, and do we know like these like basic things about like where this data is coming from, how is this data being verified, etc. So you should the OAuth Top 10 has always been, in my opinion, a great resource to start off with for anything. After that, it's about iterating and figuring out, okay, well, like these are like the really good things that OWASP has like picked up. Let's figure out like where we can expand on certain concepts and take knowledge and where we can improve.
Yes. So can we use AI to help us with vulnerability remediation? Because that is like the number one. Like we met with a bunch of customers last week, and just one of the people was like, the key takeaway is remediation, remediation, remediation. Like
Yeah.
AppSec people don't want to find bugs. What we want to do is have more secure software. That's what we really want. Just like the Spice
Mhm.
Girls. That's what we really, really want.
Yeah, no, it's true. There's there are a couple really cool startups in the space that are doing that. So I know, right? Like this is a very exciting time. So it's definitely possible, right? And I think it's actually where we need to be going. It's the only way we can really scale up fast.
Mhm.
Again, all of that will need a sort of like verification at the end. And I know I'm like kind of hitting this verification point really strongly right now. I don't
Mhm.
think like, I think in another 5 years, if we were to do a follow up, I probably wouldn't be saying that. I'd probably be saying something else.
Mhm.
Right. It's just right now we're still in infancy. So if there were to be a automatic remediation, I would like to see like a human check possible, right? Or even if we can get somewhere, I think it would be really cool. I was having a conversation with someone who is at one of these startups, and one of the really cool things that I would like he's seen and we would like to see more of is a really strong resiliency in the testing of code, right? So making sure we have like a really good pipeline for testing stuff before it goes to production, and then ensuring that like, okay, if AI is going to make this correction for us, how do we
Mhm.
test it, right? In a way where like maybe we don't actually need human intervention, right? I think we can get to the point where we're like, all right, we've got verbose enough testing where by the time a human has to click an okay, or like, you know, all good on a PR, LGTM, we've done sufficient testing to say that this is great. And yeah, I think we're in like a really exciting time to see all these things kind of bloom and blossom. Especially like the other thing is you take the amount
Mhm.
of context that all these tools are going to be having by being in your environment, it becomes a little bit easier to trust a something like AI to start making at least initial decisions. Um, but again, we still want to make sure we're doing verification.
Yes. So in the chat, Vinay, I don't have a GitHub link for the OWASP LLM from Sharif, but OpenCRE project by OWASP, that's the thing I was talking about. So yes, you've got it. And thank you for going and finding it from my brief comments. So Mo, so let's say we're doing automatic remediation and we want to have
Mhm.
really good testing. can we use the AI to help us with testing? Like, could we use it to fuzz APIs, for instance?
Yeah. So on that, this is actually a really interesting thing. If you think a little bit back to how we spoke about like L or ML being really good at a single purpose, I think on the opposite side, we have a lot of folks trying to put AI to do like multiple different functions. But it's actually really good at just doing one thing too. That's like kind of like one of the cool things. However, one of the things that makes AI a lot better than ML is that it is creative and it can create a bunch of different possibilities. They may not all be great, right, or right, but it
Mhm.
can get you close enough, and then you can tune it to be better. And eventually you'll start doing better than an actual human can. So, one of the things that I was thinking of, like let's say we had something, a service like a chatbot, right? And we've seen a bunch of these vulnerabilities out there already, and there are startups that are focusing on this too. Um, there's like the possibility of just creating different personas or different types of interactions that customers have, and then playing that through a chatbot. And there's a lot like there's this whole thing with prompt engineering where you want to create like again assume the person out, assume this person, assume this role, right? You can assume the role of a customer and give a bunch of inputs. You can assume the role of a bad actor, and then figure out, okay, well, these are the places that like we may want to attack, right? Even if you're doing something as far as like, all right, I want to like test XSS, right? These are what the payloads look like. We have so much data on like what a good XSS payload looks like. Imagine taking all of that, like the entire world's history of XSS payloads, and then saying, create some more, right? And while you would not be able to think about it, or I would not be able to think about it, this LLM may just be like, okay, well, here's like 10,000 more possibilities. Not sure if any of them will work, but I'm sure a couple of them will, right? We do some verification, we figure out which ones work. We then continue and iterate on that, iterate on that. You're going to get a lot of really, you're just going to start getting higher quality payloads. So I think there's a lot of interesting opportunity to do fuzzing, doing some output validation, also doing like some really good customer service testing in a bunch of these areas.
So, so a topic that's really hot in AppSec that I feel like it used to be quiet and it's really exploded in the past year is threat modeling. I feel
Mhm.
like it's a thing that you before when I started, it was like, oh wow, they did a threat model. And now it's like, let's do it all the time. And I get asked about it a lot, which I like because I like it. Could we could we use AI to help us with this? Is this possible? What do you think?
Yeah, so 100%. I do it every once in a while. And there are a couple that are out there to the public that are used for security research and threat modeling. I know, like, to throw out a name, Jason Haddix has a really good one that has been like really, it's a really interesting one to look at. Um, I know that I've also built one that like I haven't shared because I'm not as confident, but it's actually helped me out quite a bit in a couple different areas. I think the one thing that I mentioned a little bit earlier about the Socratic process is something that was really when I was creating one, that was like really the important thing for me. I didn't want to. Let me go back a little bit.
Okay.
When I think about doing something in AI, I want to make sure it has a purpose for the teams that I'm supporting, right? So my goal for some of the AI projects that I work on are to make sure that we can put this into something like a Slack bot or put this in a place where other people can use it. So the thing about person to person interaction is you don't want to just have someone tell you what to do. I think ever, right? Like when my parents told me I couldn't do something, you could bet 5 minutes later I'm getting in trouble for doing it, you know? So one of the important things that I've had to work on is making sure we have like a proper communication, a back and forth, a dialogue, right? Where you can extract information while not just immediately giving feedback, but saying, okay, I have this piece of information. What else do I need to know? and transferring that kind of methodology to AI or a chatbot that you have. So yes, it's really great for threat modeling, but it also depends on how you want to implement it. In my opinion, making sure that you have these checks and balances and you're getting a chatbot that can go back, look at the responses it's given, and then question those. We get a little bit closer to actual reasoning and creativity on a human level. We're not there yet. I think right now we're still at the place of intelligent search. So basically doing Google, but like on steroids. But we can get to a place where we're starting to get, all right, let's start, give me your newest implementation of what you've worked on. All right, let's look at this. Can you tell me a little bit about the frameworks that you're using? Can you tell me about the libraries? Then being able to say, okay, these are the libraries I'm using, these are the frameworks I'm using. Great, like what's your GitHub repo? It gives you your GitHub repo, doesn't tell you anything yet, right? It's looking at all these results in context. And then after that, it's saying, well, I've noticed a couple of these things over here. In conjunction with some of the things that you're planning, maybe we want to fix these issues first. Maybe we want to keep these in mind. Also, we have these, if you connect it to security documentation, we have these secure by default principles and tooling available to you that you can use. So I know I went a little bit away from like how to use it in threat modeling to how you do like customer service and like AppSec, like actual like the goal. I think you need a little bit of both, because you can do the threat modeling with a person and you can actually plan a lot of these processes around it. But at the same time, you want to figure out how you can like gather information to form a really good threat model. And the only way you do it is by having a conversation communication and showing relevant information.
So the thing that we're all talking about all the time at Semgrep right now is the idea of secure guardrails. So at first, your AppSec program's really reactive, right? And you're just trying to put out giant fires. But once you're like, okay, so things are not actively burning down, you want to get proactive so that you can basically raise the bar. And so you mentioned like kind of getting people onto the paved road, doing the secure default the way that you've planned. And so the idea of a secure guardrail is some sort of technical control that puts you back on the right path. It's like, hey, did you know you're off-roading right now? And so could we use LLMs for that, or use AI for that? Like, could we put sort of secure guardrails inside of it? Like, don't tell the devs to do this, please.
I think this is kind of one of those like half answers that I would give, where I don't feel confident in it right now. Maybe in like a couple of years, I'd feel a little bit better. I'm just thinking of like the amount of access that it would need to be able to like actually enforce guardrails. And I don't necessarily trust an AI running around infrastructure yet, especially if it doesn't understand everything about infrastructure, right? I actually think that if we wanted to move towards controls, like using AI for like implementing really good sound controls, we're probably going to have to like train a couple of different models and then have it really be really specific and have each one of those doing checks and balances on each other. Like really just like layers and layers of things that like I could not understand right now. But that's kind of like what infrastructure looks like, especially at scale. You do need to break apart all these different systems, all these different and just like controls that you have in place, how they interact with each other. And again, the onboarding for a security person is crazy. The onboarding for an AI would be way less, but I mean, it would just go wild. You're going to have more permission issues than I even want to consider. But going back to like how we can actually move towards using AI to do secure default, I think that first stage is going to be, how do we do immediate recommendations for like things that our security program already does, right? So for example, we do have a couple of test bots right now. And one of the ones that we have is really cool because our incident response team has basically made it so that someone can say, hey, I have a question about this, right? And it'll immediately be like, okay, well, like, it sounds like this actually isn't something that we want to focus on, but you can check this out. You can check this out, right? So at this point, it's just a really basic chat bot that is, again, It doesn't seem like much, but this is saving a ton of time, right? Every single one of these messages could be someone taking engineering time away from someone else. So you see these like very small wins, and I think the whole like when we first talked about like doing a talk like this, it was like, all right, well, like one, it would be great to talk about like how AI could help supply chain, but it would be even better if we could use AI to save money, right? So that's making your AppSec team really efficient, or making any of your security teams efficient, right? One of them is how do we like get away from using AppSec or using any of our security teams that are specialized, that are focused, that are solving really good problems, away from doing these level one kind, or not level one, I guess, like low priority kind of things that can be handled with a couple of pieces of documentation, or like, hey, go turn this switch on. We're not going to do it for you, but you can do it. And then backing that up with like maybe some good self-service portals, and giving customers a way to actually go and do this themselves, using AI as a very intelligent analyst in that case. Yeah.
Avoiding toil. We don't want to do toil. So in the chat, I was telling, so a thing I do whenever we have one of these is in the chat, I'll put, you should check out the Semgrep Academy, because we have a bunch of courses there. And someone put in the chat, AppSec program level 1, how to use AI to help with your AppSec, next course coming soon. And I love it. That's a fantastic idea. I so want to do that now. And I want Mo to be in it.
I'll take it. Like, that sounds fun. I would love to take the course, but yeah.
So someone also commented, researchers have used LLM agents to hack websites. And so there's some good articles such as LLM agents can autonomously hack a website by Richard Fang, Rohan, and some others. I would provide a link, but you wouldn't click that link. But so I have one, because I'm supposed to wrap up, and I'll talk to you all day, Mo.
Oh man, I love this topic. So like, I could talk about it all day.
So in the chat, someone's asking, is there a Semgrep Academy Discord? No, but there is an OSS Slack channel where we just kind of like talk about it, which I'll put in the chat in a minute. But first, I want to ask Mo this question. So first, I have a question, and then the next question, just to prepare you, is going to be like, where can people find more Mo? So like, can they connect on LinkedIn and stuff? But first,
yeah.
Okay, so I'm an AppSec nerd. Maybe I'm junior, maybe I'm senior. Where should I start if I want to start learning or using AI in my AppSec program? Like, where's a good place to start?
So one, I think it's experimentation. Just go on one of the very available vendors that I will not name because I'm not supposed to name vendors. Go on any of those, find some that you can use. Or, I can't endorse any products. So go find one of your favorite ones, and just go and see what it's like, right? Figure out like the kind of responses you get to questions that you have, and then figure out like where you want to go from there. The second part, there's this crazy concept of reading documentation. I know how rude that sounds, but please bear with me. I'm not even kidding. There are a bunch of courses, and there are a bunch of like, gurus that'll say, oh, I know the best way to use AI. This is the top 10 like prompt engineering things. I can tell you the best resources that I've had for getting to understand AI is reading how like these developers interact with it through their documentation, and then understanding like what libraries they're using to like do automation with them. So like, again, you go on any of the vendors that I did not mention, or any of the products I did not mention, some of them have really good documentation on like, okay, well, like this is how you should probably use prompts to communicate with an AI. This is how you want to use it. These are the, like, you start learning about things like, oh, like these are the token limits that I have. So now I need to like figure out how I can limit my responses. After that, you can start getting into really interesting territory. Again, not all, it can speak English, right? It can understand you. So not everything that you read has to be like this really big tech thing. You can simply read philosophy and understand like how to ask questions and how to get answers. And you can understand, again, ethics, and you can understand how to do sandboxing and all these basic things to like keep conversations on track, that will immediately contribute to how well you can utilize a prompt. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so I have to ask about the shirt because it says "ask me about" and then it's blank. Is that redacted?
So yeah, so like actually I like just didn't want to write on it in Sharpie, so I was gonna write AI, but I didn't have any time. I totally forgot to. But no, this is just a white piece of tape that I put on the shirt whenever I talk to someone about something. So like if I ever have a conversation with, or I know I'm gonna have a conversation with someone about something, I'll like throw this shirt on and I'll like ask me about board games. So like this is just tape.
Oh, that's hilarious. So ask me about whatever it is you want to talk about. I like that a lot.
Exactly. And then I have pieces of tape that say different things and I just throw them on.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's so fun. Like the human whiteboard. Okay, Mo. So this was very fun. And I suspect people are like,
Yeah.
oh, this guy Mo seems pretty cool. Maybe he has a Twitter account, or I don't know.
So yeah, I like whatever Elon Musk calls it now. What is it? Twitter X, Y. Yeah, so I have one of those. It's some guy named Mo. Um, that's also basically everything else. You can also send me an email at either mo@makesecurity.fun. That's probably the one you're going to want to use. It's also a fun domain. You can also find me on LinkedIn at needmo.info. So I have a bunch of fun domains and URLs. So
Sorry, what was the LinkedIn one? I wanted to put it in the chat.
oh, it's needmo.info. And it just redirects to my LinkedIn, which is, linkedin.com/in/whatever.
Oh, but what is the LinkedIn one so I can just find you?
I think it's linkedin.com/in/msatic1.
There you are. So just look up Mo
Yeah,
Sadik. That's probably way easier. Just like look up
exactly.
your name.
Mhm. Yeah,
Okay, cool.
exactly. So I would say, yeah, my name is probably an easy one. But yeah, I haven't written any blogs or anything, even though people have told me to. I'm just always like, I think it's always scary writing your first one, so maybe I'll have to go for that.
You know,
But yeah,
I
please reach out. I love having conversations.
maybe I could help you write a blog. So how I started writing a blog was someone at Microsoft double dog dared me to write a blog. And he said, write a blog once a month for 4 months, Tanya. And if you don't have 40 readers by the end, I'll buy you dinner. And so at the end of the 4 months, I had 400 readers. And he's like, joke's on you. Now you have a blog, loser. Now you have to write all the time. He's like, you have to do way more than I had to do. And we were working at Microsoft. He's like, I was going to make Microsoft buy you dinner. So there. So
Dang,
maybe,
did you ever get the dinner?
well, no, because I had too many readers. Because he's like, if you don't have
Dang.
40 readers, then I'll buy you dinner.
Oh,
So
okay, okay. It was if you don't. Okay,
maybe we
cool.
need to make that bet, the double dog
Excellent.
dare.
I'll do it. I'll do it. Now I've said it and it's recorded, so it has to happen, right?
And
And
then
then
I can
I
read it.
will use Gen AI to write the blog, and we'll see if you guys can tell the difference.
Oh my gosh, Mo, thank you so much for coming on. This was super duper fun.
Yeah, no, this is really, really fun. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Really enjoyed the conversation. Love talking about Gen AI. And yeah, I hope some people get to start using it. And there's a bunch of things I didn't get to talk about, but please feel free to reach out. I'm always down for a conversation.
Awesome. A bunch of people in the chat are all like, I can't wait to start reading it. So now
Hey, thank
you have
you.
at least 4 readers according to the blog, or according
Yes.
to the, including me. So, and send it to me for reals. Okay,
Cool.
for
Yeah,
real,
no, will do.
okay. So I'm really bad at saying goodbye. So we're gonna say, so usually I like to kind of like wave at the end. So like, thank you for coming to
Okay.
Semgrep Community. Thank you,
Wait, do I
Mo.
wave now? Okay.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.